For those of you who are unfamiliar with my work and my presentation, my name is Dr. Karmen Smith, and my undergraduate degree was in mental health research, specifically in learning and processing information. And so I found myself in my undergraduate paperwork doing research on racism, and it led me to implicit bias. And so when I listen to the news or I listen to other people talking and they don't understand what's going on, or they're clueless to put words to what they're feeling or what they're thinking about, or maybe they attack people that are standing up for justice right now, but they find themselves continually in a circle because it continues to happen. And I never expected to talk about race, but I've talked about race a lot. And because I have to put it in the context of spirituality. I'm a total knower of one love. And so when I don't see it showing up in the world, I have to ask the question, what's going on? And there is an answer. And I want to talk about that answer. I want to get into it because my topic is expanding awareness. When we are spiritual beings and we find this truth of the one love, the one God within us, what happens is that our veils, the lies, the deceit that keep us separated, begin to fall away. And we begin to see how the game is played and the different chess pieces that are being moved. And we can even anticipate the movement because we've become aware and we've transcended the limits of our thinking and even the limits of race or gender. We begin to see it from a higher perspective. And I want to talk about that today because if you've been practicing science of mind, if you've been doing reading Ernest Holmes, if you've been studying the New Testament and what Jesus taught and what Buddha taught, then you are above the fray, but you understand the fray and you feel empathetically what other people are going through and what you are going through as that other person. You're experiencing yourself in sorrow. So I want to talk about it so that people that are on their spiritual path know what's going on. I never want to hear people that are on their spiritual path go, well, I don't know what's going on. I don't know. Confusion is a military tactic. And as long as I can keep you confused, then you won't know a solution and you'll be running in all kinds of directions, just like Janie was saying. That's what fear does. But people that are on their spiritual path are not in fear. They are in knowing and in love. So let's break it down today. What is implicit bias? Implicit bias is how you can control a population. First, you have to introduce something that the person can be afraid of. I have to introduce fear in you. And I've got to start it at an early age. I've got to build that propaganda up so that you don't even know that you've been programmed to hate. You don't even know you've been programmed to fear. And if you don't know it, when something comes up, you're going to say, well, I don't know where that came from. Why does this keep happening? And you don't even know that the program is also in you. And on our spiritual journey, we're asked to look at ourselves. And how can we look at implicit bias if it's hidden? So let's talk about how implicit bias look at it as a knife, because it is a weapon. It's used to control a population. So on one side of it, both sides are very sharp. And so what I need to do is introduce things in the school system. I want to put it in textbooks. And when I go back and look at my upbringing and the textbooks that I had, grew up in Kansas City, Missouri. And I remember the lessons were on slavery, and in that chapter, small chapter, there were cartoonish images of black people with big white lips, and they looked like they were just buffooneries or buffoons. They were stupid. And they were cartoons. So this embedded in my mind, are black people stupid? Were they better off in chains? This was how the textbook in my elementary and middle school showed me about slavery. And the abolitionists, which should have been the hero in the story, who were the ones that were, usually they were Caucasian, some were not, but they were saying that human beings should not be enslaved. And how were they portrayed? As devils, as evil people, as cartoonish people, meaning they shouldn't have done that. This is how insidious implicit bias is, and it starts from a young age. What else did I experience growing up in Kansas City, Missouri? I remember my earliest memory, or one of my earliest memories of race, was hearing on the news and on the radio, and I would always watch the news, it was always on. My parents were very well informed about civil rights and about the riots, and they were constantly on television. And what I remember seeing and hearing about were 4 little black girls that were bombed in a church bombing. And I remember being scared to go to church. And when I looked back recently when that situation happened, it was in 1963. So that was my earliest memory, and I was 3 years old. This starts young. What it taught me was that it's scary to be a black person in the United States of America. It also taught me that my personhood, my human beingness, was not of value to the larger culture. I learned that at 2.5, 3 years old, and I didn't learn it from my parents. I learned it from within the context of my environment, how I lived. And as you know, if the sun and the air and the water is not in a plant's environment, that plant will die, their self-esteem will die. And so that sword, which is a military weapon of implicit bias, which keeps control over a population, has 2 sides. One is the destruction of the self-esteem of black and brown people, and it is intentional. Don't let anyone know, well, I don't know why. It's intentional. It is a weapon. Just like you build a gun intentionally to shoot somebody, you build implicit bias within a culture to kill a population. Now let me tell you about the other side of that same sword. The other side is it teaches people that are not black and brown that the value of a black and brown person is devalued. That means that something has to be uplifted as supreme value, and that's the Caucasian in the United States of America. What people don't understand is that sword swipes both people. It kills both people. This does not eventually uplift Caucasian people. What it does is it kills their soul, because you cannot be of one love. Let me repeat that. You cannot be of one love and hold hatred in your heart for another person. Now, let me just say that most people will say, well, I'm not racist. I don't think black and brown people are less than me. Those are words. Implicit bias deals with your thoughts, your actions, and you're not even aware of it. That's how insidious this is. So that's why in the United States, we had something called redlining. And if a black person had a loan, and on the loan application it said that they were African American, that the implicit bias of the loan officer would say, no, we're not going to allow a loan to go through without any real credit score information. That's what implicit bias does. It is a spur of the moment, in a second, decision that we make that is impulsive because subconsciously implicit bias information is in our mind and we only access it in those impulsive moments. So what am I saying? I'm saying that this is going to continue until we expand our awareness. When we start looking at textbooks and how people are portrayed, when we start looking at the news and when we see parents separated from their children and they happen to be brown, we need to understand that their audience is a 3-year-old and a 70-year-old. But the 70-year-old says, oh my God, here we go again. And the 3-year-old says, I'm not of value. And it continues and it perpetuates. My son, who is 26 years old, he wasn't around with the bombings of the girls in the church, but he was around for Hurricane Katrina and seeing images of people that are black and brown suffering is a double-edged sword. It tells him that he has no value, and it tells Caucasian people, well, I have value, that would never happen to me. And it goes into that corners of their mind. And when they think and when they talk, it comes out as hate. And then, because it is an intentional weapon, and it is intentionally made to control a population, so that I can get away with whatever I want to get away with over here, but let me give you some hate to chew on. Let me give you some fear to react to. And then I'm going to say that your protests, when you protest this, I don't know why it happens. This is an anomaly. We can't control this. When you deliver that helplessness, then I will crash down on you with the vengeance that you've never seen before, and I will show it on television. Because my audience, it's not you, really. You're used to this. It's the 3-year-old. So I've heard this many times before, and also in the 60s. The United States would be a great country, would be, if they had a race conversation, if they had a conversation about race, if they had an open mind to talking about this and thinking about this. But people don't want to go into the recesses of their mind. If you're on the spiritual path, you're doing that all the time. If you're not on the spiritual path, you're just going along with everything else. You're going along like a robot or artificial intelligence because it doesn't touch me. I'm comfortable. But what's going to destroy the America that you think you have is implicit bias. It is a weapon that cuts both ways. It's the violence in Chicago, and it's the violence in the police force. It cuts both ways. It cuts the self-esteem, And it makes people so separate from the one love, the one God, that they're dead anyway. They're just walking zombies. And this reminds me of Ernest Holmes' quote, where he says, practically the whole world, the whole human race is hypnotized because it thinks what somebody else told them to think. And so the science of mind is saying, look at your mind. Is it in alignment with God or is it not? And when it's not in alignment, and when you see images on the news of black person, and then you say, you hear the word violence, criminal, that is a seed. And when you see a white person, and that face says, well, he was accused, allegedly, and both of them haven't had a trial. This is implicit bias training. And we need to call it out, not only in our textbooks in school, but in the media, in social media, with our neighbors' conversation, with our family, and with our thoughts even. And my thoughts included. I am not immune to implicit bias. I grew up in the United States of America, the propaganda capital of the world. So I have implicit bias too. But I'm constantly going, okay, Karmen, where did that come from? Oh, I don't want to hold on to that. Did that affect my conversation with that person? If it did, let me correct this. Because we're all on a journey of one love. We are all trying to obtain that alignment. And there are days, there are weeks, there are years when I feel like I am in alignment. And then there are moments where I hear somebody saying, well, I don't know why this happened. I'm like, really? You don't know why? When our very vocabulary says that black is negative and Caucasian or white is a positive thing, you don't know that our language, everything that you see, our school system, everything in that environment is saying this, and you wonder why a white police officer puts his knee on a neck for 9 minutes and not 2 minutes? Really? Then it's time to wake up and expand your awareness. Because if you don't expand your awareness and you want to stay in helplessness, that's not alignment with God. Alignment with God is power, and it is knowledge, it is wisdom, and to know what the issue is so we can tackle it at all kinds of tentacle areas. Because it has its roots that are deep in this country. In this country. So who is going to fix it but the spiritual people that are on their path? Who is going to recognize it but us? This is real. And it is our call to action, not helplessness. And to call it out when we see it. And to call it out from our thoughts. That's our spiritual journey. So let's take a deep breath. I love people. And I have a spiritual love practice that I do. And if I told you the spiritual love practice, you'd probably be like, oh my God, Karmen, I could never do that. Because I know people that could never do it. But I'm not here to make people feel comfortable. Jesus wasn't here to make people feel comfortable. Because when you start loving, oh, you go into some uncomfortable areas. Because it shows you the worst of people. And you're supposed to love them? You know, and I think back to Jesus on the cross. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Chicago, the violence in the black community, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. Implicit bias. Aubrey's killers, a black man jogging, shot down. Then they show images of him in the park, and maybe he was supposed to get shot because what now? How does that work? This implicit bias. It's maybe not meant for you, it's meant for a 3-year-old. The people that shot Aubrey, 26 years old, the same age as my son Lauren. I took the pictures of the killers, the murderers, the people that are in jail now. And I blew up that picture of them. The McMichaels, I believe is their name. And I blew up their eyes. And I looked into their eyes and I said, I'm not leaving this table. I'm not going to stare off until I love them. The officer that had his knee on a neck for 9 minutes. As soon as they posted his mugshot, I looked into his eyes and I said, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. Implicit bias. So this is a call to love. I went to the protest last night. Lauren went last night protesting for his life. And this is the sign that I always have. I don't have to make a new one. For each protest I go to, it's the same one. How do you replace hate? Well, you've got to know where it's coming from. How do you love? Well, that takes practice. Let's take a deep breath. When I say I love you guys, I so mean it. I love you guys so, so, so much. And just know that you're in my heart always, even when we're not connected to Zoom. And I just want you to practice this love, incorporate it into your life, into everything that you do, everything that you see, and everyone that you touch. And as you begin to practice, it becomes more powerful, more vibratory, and that is where our power is. It is in the love that nothing or no one or no implicit bias can destroy. That love is real.